Welcome back to Drilling Deeper, a Pit and Quarry podcast. We've got episode 27 on tap, and we're going to be talking about autonomous hauling in aggregates. I'm Kevin Yanik, editor-in-chief of the magazine, and we've got with us, once again, Jack Kopanski, our managing editor. Jack, what's going on today?
Kevin, it's a great day to talk about autonomous hauling. Great day to drill deeper into some aggregates. Glad to have you back. I enjoyed hosting solo for a couple episodes, talking to The Economist, but it's not the same without my partner in crime. So, glad to have you back.
I'm glad you wanted me back. You know, and actually, this is the official start of year 2 of Drilling Deeper. So we appreciate everybody out there who's listened or watched and helped to sustain and grow this podcast. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a change up for Jack and I in our regular everyday, and same thing with Marie Emmerich, our producer behind the scenes. And we're looking forward to bringing you additional content on this platform in the the months and in the years to come. But today, as I mentioned, Jack, we're going to be talking about autonomous hauling, and I know we touched on this topic in the past on Drilling Deeper regularly in the magazine, because it's really something that's of interest in terms of like a tremendous or great change for our industry. We talked about autonomous hauling and mining, and how we've seen autonomous haul trucks there for many years now, even going back to the 80s and 90s, and here we are in 2024, and we're seeing pilot project after pilot project kind of get off the ground, many of which are with some of the big producers like CRH and Heidelberg Materials, for example. And we've got a couple of guests today who are going to bring us up to speed on what's happening in this new exciting category, autonomous hauling. Representatives from Safe AI and Pronto. From Safe AI, we were fortunate to visit with Bibhrajit Halder at the Mine Expo show not too long ago, and that was the same venue where we got together with Christian Kurasek. He's the CFO at Pronto. Safe AI and Pronto are both autonomous technology companies, and they kind of go about doing things a little bit differently. There's different vendors in this space, Jack, and we got to know Pronto a little bit because I think an article that you brought to my attention that we ultimately ran in Pit and Quarry, exploring the size of autonomous haulers and what size is back, and we're going to hear some of that from Christian later on today in the episode, and Bibhrajit Halder, I've interviewed before for Pit and Quarry, and both are very knowledgeable on this topic at the forefront, and had a lot of exciting things to share with us when we sat down at Mine Expo. So I'm excited to get into this topic today and dissect it a little bit at the back end of today's interviews, Jack.
Yeah, it kind of seems like a fitting time to revisit this topic. Like you mentioned, we've obviously talked about it on the podcast. It sort of seemed like around the time we started the podcast, it almost felt like there wasn't an episode where we didn't somehow talk about autonomous hauling at some point. And obviously we shifted gears from that a little bit after we kind of talked it to death at a point. But it's been probably about maybe year and a half since your first story talking about the collaboration between Luckstone and Caterpillar at one of the Luckstone operations, how they were going to outfit the 777s with some autonomous technology to work in an aggregate operation. That was really kind of one of the bigger announcements we'd heard about that at the time, about sort of that scaling down where the stuff had been seen in large, massive mining trucks, but sort of scaling down to the 100-ton or lower rated haul trucks and aggregates was sort of a unique thing that you were able to learn about and write about. I know there were a couple stories on that. So yeah, glad we were able to, or I guess I should say glad you were able to talk to Bibhrajit and Christian here. And you mentioned the story we did on Pronto before, again, probably about a year ago at this point. Definitely a lot of good information. I think the most interesting thing that I remember from that conversation is that Christian sort of described their autonomy or their autonomous offering sort of as he called it a dog bone. He's like, on either end, the loading and the unloading are going to be the same. Whatever happens in the middle, we can sort of tweak and adjust depending on, haul roads, depending on what needs to be done. So kind of an interesting way to look at it. And just excited to dive back into a topic that I think is becoming more and more relevant as the years go on, and excited to see what the future holds, and excited to share what Bibhrajit and Christian had to say in Mine Expo.
We're going to hold Christian till the second half here, and we're going to start you off with Bibhrajit Halder of Safe AI. He's got a lot of exciting announcements to share related to his company and kind of where we are with autonomous hauling, and we're not too far off from seeing haulers go into production mode for autonomy, or very close, it sounds like, from what Bibhrajit shared with us. So, and without further ado, let's hear from the man himself, Bibhrajit Halder. Well, we probably last talked maybe 6 months ago, I'm guessing at this point. We're here at the end of September at the Mine Expo show. What's transpired, with Safe AI, with the technology at large here, in the last 6 months, and what updates can you share, and maybe what are the next steps for the progression of the technology?
Definitely. Just to give very quick background, like how autonomy, and I tell people, right, mining industry started autonomy before anybody else. I think a lot of people don't understand. Back in 2000, they already started. And one statistics I always love to give, there is a 2000 autonomous truck, fully autonomous, no human in the loop, running last 12 years, moved 10 billion tons of material, not a single accident. It's just an amazing statistic. So that's just gonna give you started. Mining is not, they know autonomy very, very well than a lot of other industry. I think what you're seeing here, the energy and everybody, and I can see that all the OEM, all the partner, that now they're saying, how do we accelerate? How do you take it to the even half of the vehicle all autonomous? So there's a lot of companies out there we can talk about. So they are pushing the boundary.
We're hearing and seeing too that aggregate producers, maybe some of the biggest producers, and you guys are working with one being CRH here in 2024, that there's a lot of interest, that we're seeing pilot projects get underway and talked about. Where are we with aggregates? I mean, you talk about mining and how autonomy has very much been present in that for a long while now. Now aggregates is finding its place and making some headway, it seems.
Yeah, and we are super excited about our collaboration with CRH. We are running in Georgia, one of the sites in Georgia. So I think aggregate, if you look at just a business in general, they're very stable business. They run this anywhere from 35 to 90 ton truck continuously. And they are having the same issue that everybody, labor shortage, the safety, all that thing. They wanted autonomy long time. What is happening now that autonomy come to a certain maturity and the cost point, they can really deploy. One of the thing, I know you're very excited about aggregate. One of the thing you'll be very pleasantly surprised next year that aggregate will start seeing that in production. And once you see that in production at a cost that is less than their current cost and productivity about 15% more, is going to change the way we do. So 2025 is going to be very much pivotal moment for aggregate for autonomy.
In production in 2025, I mean, I guess what's left to do? It sounds like you're finding a lot of benefits to the programs that you're employing out there with your end user partners. I guess how have we gotten to that point here, so close?
I think the industry was ready. What was holding them back was that the price point was not ready. Their type of vehicle was not like, think about 25 ton, 35 ton, 90 ton truck, which is popular in aggregate, was not available for autonomy. I was just listening to one of the discussion today a few hours ago. Wenco CEO Andrew Pine and Scania and head of their autonomy was talking how they are producing vehicle now for this market because the smaller vehicle. When I say smaller compared to mining, 200 ton, 100 ton is smaller. So I think that's the one thing. And the second thing is that now the vehicles are available. We are retrofitting any vehicle. We're doing the 90 ton truck. We're doing 35 ton. That making the industry available. Second thing that is happening, a quarry operation is not as long as mining. So the price point that works for mining doesn't work for quarry. But now the price point went down. So that's another big thing. Third thing happening, which is probably not that obvious, is the network. The cost of network has gone down because you need network for running autonomy. In a mining, to setting up a network take millions of dollars. You're not going to be spend $1 million in a quarry to run the network. But now that $1 million gone down to less than 100K.
What has transpired that's allowed that price point to scale downward exactly?
Yeah, so I think I'll kind of reverse the order. Let's talk about network first. What is happening is that all of a sudden right now we are able to do, and with NVIDIAs and all that, all the compute on board. We in a sense of autonomous technology, doesn't need the connection back to the server or some sort of a backend. Now, once I don't need this connection, I don't need the network reliability high. Once I don't need the network reliability high, my cost of network goes down, right? Giving it a perspective, if I need to, every second I need to talk to somebody, I need to make sure it's a solid. But if I say, if you don't talk to me for 5 minutes, I can still run. All of a sudden I say, okay, give me a network that is okay. And I'll give you an example. We have been trying out Starlink, right? You're familiar with Starlink. In Japan, in US, we're going to try it in Latin America. If Starlink picks up, now we're not even talking about 100K. We're talking about less than 50K, and you got a network. And it is fundamentally going to change the game, not just for autonomy, but also for the digitalization and connectivity. It's a massive change. And the third component of cost is that just the hardware and the software and the availability, because of the automotive industry, cost is going down. One data point, and I'll pause there. We started with a LiDAR, $35,000. Now we use a LiDAR that is $3,000. And $3,000 LiDAR is much better than the $35,000. And that $3,000 even going to go down. So that's kind of the price point is dropping.
Do you see, so you mentioned 2025, we're going to see trucks go into production. Yeah. We'll see them in real world applications, it sounds like. I guess, how much momentum are we going to see? Like, who's going to step into that? We talked prior to this, earlier in the year, Bibhrajit, about, this being kind of centered around the bigger players, and, they have the time and the ability to make the investments here. Are we to the point where this could trickle down to smaller companies, mid-sized companies, sites that are only running a single truck? Or I guess, what are the limitations that we still need to try to break?
Yeah, I think 2025 is still going to be the big players. The big players means CRH of the world. You can take out the top 5, right? The reason being, it is not to the point of polishness that it can get to the next one. We need another year under our belt as an industry to get that. So I think in the 2025, we are still seeing the big people, big company, who both have not only the finance and the R&D budget, but also the vision. They are taking the industry to the next stage. Once they solidify the use case, they say, yep, it's working. Then you see 2026, it will trickle down to the what we call mid-size one. Right? It takes a time to get there.
I remember talking with you prior to this as well, Bibhrajit, about starting with haul trucks, but then maybe excavators, maybe dozers. I was in the West Hall here today, and they were talking about autonomy with drills. So it seems like, again, we're just scratching the surface, starting with haul trucks. Maybe that's the low-hanging fruit. And are you optimistic and eager to maybe see what maybe else can be attacked and addressed and tackled successfully?
Yeah. Let me start with the broader. The thing that we talk internally, that anything that moves will become autonomous. Guaranteed. Now the question is that who is on the line second and third and fourth. I think that it depends on which use case is easier to do, more repeatable, and cost effective. So we are tackling dozer, the next one. So think about dozer, they do a very simple job. Push the material, clean the road, move this thing. So dozer is something we are already doing. We already deployed dozer last year. Think about CAT 71, CAT D61, D71, that size. So it's a construction quality size of dozer. It is going to go into the excavator next. Drill is different. Drill is already there because drill is not moving. When you say drill autonomy, it's more like I am autonomously controlling the bit of the drill. Not necessarily, drill doesn't move.
Right.
So that's a very different technology. But I think we are doing truck, then dozer, then eventually excavator will come. Excavator is just that much harder because you are not only moving from point A to B, you are also interacting with the ground. And
dynamic, changing environment.
Very much. And for regular people to understand this thing, if you go to any site, if you look at that, who makes more money, a truck operator or excavator operator? Actually, you start with the truck, you graduate to excavator operator. What that tells you, the excavator operator is a lot more complicated, they make a lot more money, so that is intuitively, even if you don't understand autonomy, then okay, I see excavator must be harder. That's why excavator hasn't happened yet, but it will eventually get there.
So 2025 or 2026 and beyond, we get production moving along, trucks are running autonomously in pits and quarries across the U.S. What do the jobs look like around that? What does the management of those autonomous haulage systems look like?
So I think what we'll see that those jobs, the machine is going to do that, right? More and more. Not the 26, let's say another 5 years. What human is going to do the planning part, right? They will do the planning. They will do the orchestrating. They will say, okay, now I have a machine that's going to do the job it's going to do. Simple example, right? Let's say you want to do your laundry. You say, okay, I am going to put the laundry. You are not going to do, and if you go 100 years back, how would you laundry? It's like, oh my God, I got to go there, go. You are not doing that. You are saying, I have a plan, right? So what you will do broadly, humanity, like human will do a lot more planning part of it, which is where we should be spending time. And broadly, what you'll see the benefit to the humanity is that we're going to do more of this job, less time with the less cost. And that's really, and I have another thing I always say, like broadly, 20% of the world is built well, 80% of the world is looking at 20% of the world, say, I want it also like that, but I want to do it much faster with a less price. And that's what's going to happen.
What else is next? I mean, it sounds like we're nearing the finish line to get to production, but what else would you like to see transpire in the autonomy space? What's something we haven't potentially touched on yet?
So I think that we didn't talk about digitalization that much. We didn't talk about electrification. I think electrification is happening on its own. So that's a big element. I think I'll talk about the digitalization part. I think right now when you talk about digitalization, we talk about can we get to know the machine health? Can we get to fix it? But those are baby application. What you're going to see that once we know how the machine is working, I can plan better. So I think we haven't seen the impact of digitalization in this industry because we are not very data savvy industry. Once you see this machine becoming smarter, giving better data, doing the job we're asking it to do exactly, we can better use that. The data will be very mature. The way I say it is that there has to be enough iPhone in the world to see what WhatsApp look like. Same way, there has to be enough smart machine in the query and mining to see what the data can do. But data will do magic to this industry.
And at the end of the day, it's all kind of going to work together.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, Bibhrajit, anything else you'd like to add? We really appreciate you coming by the booth and sharing a little bit about what's happening out there with autonomous hauling and Safe AI's experience.
I mean, at Safe AI, we are very excited. We are running in a gold mine in Australia. One of our partner and customer, Thies, who is also have a booth here. I just had a meeting with their CEO. Amazing company. I think we are literally moving production dart for them, which is a big step for us because production dart is a key thing. We obviously in Japan, we are doing the Japan. We are teaming there. In US, we are expanding. So we are very excited about the future, where it is going.
Well, looking forward to keeping tabs on it, and we'll keep in touch. Bibhrajit, thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's always nice to see you.
That was Bibhrajit Halder of Safe AI. Bibhrajit, thanks again for getting together and sharing your insights and updates related to autonomous hauling and aggregates.
Before we continue, a word from one of our Drilling Deeper sponsors, Techway. For over 50 years, processors of everything from French fries to frac sand have counted on Techway to provide the most durable, accurate, and reliable in-motion feeding, weighing, and metering equipment for their dry material handling needs. Techway specializes in providing tailored solutions that endure the test of time and material. The company's quality line of products are proudly made in the USA. Thanks again to Techway for being a sponsor of this episode of Drilling Deeper.
Well, we've got the second half of our autonomous hauling interviews on tap for you, and again, that is with Pronto's Christian Kurasek. Christian, again, came by the Mine Expo booth and offered us kind of an overview on some projects they're doing with Heidelberg Materials and talked about their approach to autonomy as it relates to work in aggregates, and it's a little bit different than what some other companies are doing in their approach. So let's hear a little bit from Christian Kurasek of Pronto. But you guys have taken kind of an interesting path, too, because autonomy isn't necessarily brand new to mining. I mean, it's been around, and there's hundreds or maybe a few thousand trucks around the world that have autonomous haulage systems on them. In our space, it seems like this is very, very new. But you guys are starting from the aggregate space or the smaller trucks. And we did publish an article, that Pronto shared with us within the last year or two about this topic. Which size truck is best for autonomy. But yeah, I guess there's different systems out there. There's Pronto and there's others. I guess why is it that you think some companies have come at autonomy from the mining standpoint, like the bigger standpoint, and you guys are coming at it from, I guess, a smaller point of view, and you're making the case that maybe smaller, mid-size is better or more manageable. So just that whole idea of, we're seeing autonomy from different angles at this point.
A few thoughts there. So, I think autonomy in kind of the mining and quarrying space started with the biggest trucks, the biggest operations, for a couple of reasons. One, really what they're solving for there is productivity and uptime, right? So if you're mining a high value global commodity that you can sell as much as you produce, you're gonna want those trucks running nonstop. And then it's also much less price sensitive. And so I think that was kind of the source of demand, and that's what you saw the original systems responding to. This is no criticism, but when you look at where that started 20, 30 years ago, and you're talking about companies that make yellow iron at scale really, really well, that's a different skill set than developing artificial intelligence and advanced software that powers our autonomy. So we came at it more from a technology perspective, whereas I think systems have traditionally come more at it just solving the problem, and cost was less of a consideration. So we're porting. Our team's history goes back to 2004, the DARPA Grand Challenge, and doing on-road for a very long time. So just a completely different mindset and approach. I think of it more as distributed autonomy, where the intelligence is on the trucks, versus more big industrial kind of centralized autonomy systems. So that's kind of, I think, the two different angles you're talking about. And again, there's no reason why our technology can't scale up to the big operations, the biggest trucks. They care about profit margins too. So if they can get a product, an autonomy product that they can deploy in a more flexible, lower cost, faster manner, I would think they're going to buy it. So those are the conversations we're having here this week.
Sure. From my understanding, Christian, it seems like you mentioned the top 10 or some of the bigger agro producers. They're the ones that are venturing out, doing these projects, partnering with companies like Pronto, Heidelberg Materials, for example. You guys are doing some unique projects in Texas. Is it limited at this point to like the bigger companies in terms of exploration? I guess where's the line in terms of who can get involved in this space and who's kind of outside until further notice?
I don't think there's anybody outside. We've done a deployment that was a small quarry in Northern California, running 2 or 3 trucks, and we've obviously made the announcement about the project with Heidelberg. I don't think we disclosed the number of trucks there, but it's going to be more than 2 or 3. And we're working on some other stuff actually in the mining sector where that'll be probably our first foray into big numbers of Pronto powered Pronto AHS powered trucks running in a single site. So again, kind of going back to that was our philosophy was let's make a system that works at the smallest sites, smallest trucks, and then there's no limit to where we can go with that.
What the dynamic nature of the quarry versus a mine? Quarries have a lot of variations, I suppose, whereas big mines, copper mine, for example, probably has longer haul roads, so maybe it's easier to arguably get a AHS system into that sort of operation. But what are the pain points that need to be overcome through some of the trialing that you're doing with agri producers or otherwise to kind of ultimately get this to real world application?
It's a really good question. There's a few things. I mean, there's the technology piece. How do you make this work at a price point, right? If you're talking about trucks that maybe cost $500,000, your system can't cost $500,000. So how do you make that system work in a way that's productive, safe, reliable at a lower price point? So there's a lot of different facets that gone into that. Starting from our sensor stack, we use only vision. A lot of folks say that's not possible, but we've demonstrated it is. So there's a whole slew of technical problems, and our engineering team I would argue is the best in the world at what we do. There's the change management piece that's critical in any deployment, right? You're changing the nature of how these businesses go about producing their product. And then there's also, ancillary stuff, right? So how do you manage the fleet? How do you do dispatch? How do you ensure there's a communications network that the autonomy needs to operate? And the way we've addressed that is we produce a fully integrated product. So we do everything from, we build our own drive-by-wire kits, any sort of steering actuation sensors that need to be installed on the truck. We design, we build, we install. We obviously design all the software, all the way through to we deploy our own private LTE networks at sites that need connectivity. So connectivity actually ends up becoming a pretty big challenge in its own right.
Just the remote nature of the sites, you're saying? Or?
The remote nature, and how do you ensure you've got seamless coverage covering an entire haul route if it's a big site? Right, you don't want the trucks running without connectivity for a variety of safety reasons. And so getting that coverage and making sure that the coverage isn't the weak link that causes the trucks to stop, right? That's the last thing you want happening is trucks that need a wireless network to operate, and all of a sudden you can't communicate. So it's a big challenge to do that in a cost-effective way. It's easy to throw money at it and build a network. but doing it in a cost-effective way is not a small task.
Christian, where do you think we are in the time frame in terms of the adoption of systems like a Pronto? I assume that we're still kind of in the early stages, but and where can we ultimately get this industry? Can we get it fully to autonomy? I mean, what's the vision you have that Pronto has for the future of what hauling is going to be like?
I think there's different levels to that. Well, to your first question about kind of where it's at today, I think there's the last 12 to 18 months, there's really been an inflection point. I think the industry's kind of hit that criticality point where enough people have seen it. They see that it's safe. They see the productivity improvements. They see the other cost savings. It helps solve the challenges with finding drivers these days. We like to say nobody in the industry wanted to be first. We used to say everybody wants to be 10th, but now we're learning everybody wants to be second. And so the interest has moved from let's pilot this, let's see this cool demo, cool tech on our site, to how quickly can we deploy it, and how many sites can you guys get to, and how long is it going to take. That's the challenge we face right now is keeping up with customer demand. I think because it is a huge productivity boost, because it does improve safety, because it does solve labor shortages, it is going to be the future of haulage. There's no reason you need a human in there in harm's way doing a job that people increasingly don't want to do anymore. So that future is happening. The next question we get a lot is, well, what's the next piece of the production that's going to be automated? I think most certainly the entire operation involved in a quarry or a mine will be automated at some point. We're starting with haul trucks because it's such a huge component of the industry. It's the easiest component of the operation to automate. The next tool is kind of an open question. It does require some additional artificial intelligence magic to be able to do things that are more dynamic, like operating an excavator or a loader or a dozer. But that'll certainly be the next step in the evolution, is automating other tools.
Christian, cost is a factor impacting the equation here. I mean, you don't have to get into specifics, but obviously that's a barrier, until it's more fully proven and we have adopters and it's, I guess, more widespread in use. That cost is going to continue to slow, just like anything that's coming new in terms of technology or equipment. I would imagine at some point, as this is adopted, the technology will become more affordable. That will allow more producers to get involved, to invest. Is that kind of the way you see it playing out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, we are very intentionally making this as cost effective as possible. And again, just to bring back to the sensor stack, right? Cameras do not cost a lot. So that saves on a lot of costs. We are, right, especially when you're starting out and before an operator can see the productivity improvements, they're just looking at the ROI and what do I pay a driver, right? So that's kind of what you're competing with. And so you have to make it cost competitive within reason on that to make the business case. Costs will absolutely come down, as we scale up and start producing hardware in greater volumes. The cost of all the components will of course come down. We would love to be 50% the cost of an operator, and so that's kind of where we're trying to get to.
Is that doable? I mean, is that an existing barrier to kind of get everything to the point where it's competitive with that operator in the truck?
I think at scale, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's still an early tech. We're still a young company, and it's like any emerging tech, any growing company, it takes some time. But I don't think there's any barrier to get in there.
Christian, I've never personally been into an operation that was doing a trial run. I think that'd be an awesome opportunity. But can you take us in? Any partnership that you have, like what's it like in the quarry? I mean, how do you get it set up, and what's a typical trial run entail? I mean, we're talking months or longer to kind of get an understanding of how this AHS system can fit into an existing operation. And when you go from site to site, I mean, what have you learned in terms of what's applicable in other sites and what isn't necessarily applicable from site A to site B?
Yeah. So part of the question in there is kind of how long, what does the pilot look like? It's an evolving thing, right? I think when we first started out, just doing a demo with one truck was cool, but that wasn't enough to convince somebody to make
buy.
any sort of serious commitment, whether that was just a 6-month whatever. And so we worked with a lot of different partners to do 1, 2, 3 month pilots. We can do the actual retrofit of a truck in as little as a day in terms of putting our kit on. The other things that take time, getting the communications network set up, talked about how that's a key piece of it. Doing the commissioning and the testing and things like that. So we had one customer where it was 2 months start to finish doing a pilot. They wanted to make sure they could see the trucks hitting human productivity levels. Once they saw that, they said, okay, let's move to a larger pilot, and then let's go into production. And so, very rightfully so, companies are cautious and doing their diligence. But what we're seeing is that cycle shorten, right? Because as you get validation in the industry that it works, that it's safe, you start to cut some of those steps out and start to tighten them up. At the same time, we also are very focused on how do we make deployments faster and easier for customers. Historically, I think the legacy kind of systems, now we're talking about much bigger scales, but can take years to implement. We've done implementations as quickly as 2 or 3 months, which to, I think, a lot of operators, they're like, wow, that's amazing, that's fast. To us, that's an eternity. And so we're trying to get that down. There's certainly a floor to do things right and do things safely, but we'd love to get that down to like a month.
Christian, what's your background? How did you get into this niche universe in mining and aggregates?
Serendipity. My background, I was actually an engineer as an undergrad. I got to be careful advertising that around the office because we've got some of the best engineers in the world, and they're like, you're not a real engineer. What have you ever engineered? I was in finance. I was a banker for over 10 years, and then got to know the Pronto team a few years back. You look at their track record, the promise that this technology holds in general, and then I think focusing on the mining industry where it's $1 trillion industry. It's always been there. It always will be there, and I include quarrying in that. If it's not mined, it's grown. Is a truism that will never change. I kind of looked at all of that and said, man, this is an amazing opportunity to get in on the ground floor and help build something that has the potential to be a truly world-changing technology. And I think autonomy in general fits into that description. Our team, based on all of the experience they've had, thinks that truly scalable autonomous vehicles on public roads is still a ways off, right? Waymo's doing some amazing things in certain cities, but could you take an autonomous vehicle and just drop it in a new city, or start in San Francisco and drive to New York, which, by the way, we did in 2018 with an autonomous car? It's not going to be able to do that. The brilliance of focusing on this industry where the tech is mature enough to operate truly driverless. It solves a massive problem, delivers really unbelievably impressive economic results, and it's a massive industry that the world economy is always going to need. It was something I couldn't say no to.
Maybe just one more question for you, Christian. Again, we're here at Mine Expo, but you'd mentioned earlier that there's a lot of people coming through the booth. There's intrigue. I guess what's the general sentiment, whether it's an aggregate producer, a mining company, when they see the technology? I think everybody at this point knows that it's there. When they engage you in the booth, engage Pronto in the booth, what are they saying? that they want to get involved? I mean, is it just a matter of intrigue? Like, it's probably a mix of responses you're getting, but maybe you can kind of sum it up for us, what you're hearing from people here at Mine Expo.
That's an interesting question. There's a lot of incredulity that they're like, no, come on, you can't just do this with cameras. You can't do it that cheap. You can't do it that fast. We've got videos of deployments that we're playing. We've obviously got some public announcements out there about what we're doing. So a lot of questions. People, get to come by the booth and touch and feel it and see how it all is actually implemented. So, it starts to click, and they're like, okay, that makes sense. I get it. All right, so maybe this does work. They don't believe that we can do it at the cost point that we can do it. But I think also seeing how it works helps with that. And this kind of goes back to that sales cycle shortening. A lot of, do you guys think you could do this site? It looks like this. These are the trucks we have. How long would it take? How much would it cost? Follow-ups about starting to scope that out. So I think, people are always going to want to see the tech work in real life and make sure it works in their operations. But I think a lot of that, the last couple of years have really been proving out that a system like this does work. And now that we're proving it does, we're just seeing increasing interest in deploying it. Because, again, it's solving a real problem that folks are dealing with every day.
Is the number one driver of this, you're saying the shortage of people?
We hear that from virtually every customer.
Okay. It's just a matter of trying to jump the gun and find that solution. It's going to put the bullet to the problem that we've had for 15 plus years as an industry.
Yeah. It's, doesn't matter which part of the industry, which country we're talking to customers in. It seems like 20 to 25% of driver seats are unfilled, and there's just a lot of churn. You can always solve labor shortages with higher wages. But, especially in like aggregates, you're dealing with a commodity, $30 a ton. You don't have a lot of margin to solve, every problem by just throwing money at it. And people are spending a lot of time recruiting and dealing with churn and things like that. There's a lot of damage and wear and tear and maintenance required on trucks because humans drive them, right? You take a turn too fast, you're hard on the tires, you're hard on the suspension, you burn more fuel because you're not paying attention to the speed limit, right? Like if you run the simulation and 20 miles an hour is the optimal speed, if I'm an operator, I may hit the gas and get to the queue early and get a couple of minutes of rest and just get to, right? But that's not the most efficient use of fuel. So there's just seeing the economics, knowing that it solves a big problem with the labor. I think it's something that folks have wanted and dreamed about for a long time, and now that they see it's actually there and it's within reach economically, they're really, really excited about it.
Maybe one more question for you. I know I probably asked my last question three ago, but
sure.
But so we're taking the drivers out. That's the idea behind it. But I assume there's still jobs that will be there, or the jobs will evolve into something else. So if you're, Heidelberg Materials or Vulcan Materials, whomever, aggregates company, ABC, like what does the job or what does the nature of the work around the whole system look like inside those producing companies? Like who's going to oversee? You still have to oversee it to a degree, right?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. It's like any technology. There'll be some disruption and displacement. If you look at the skill level required to drive a truck, right, it's less skill and that commands a lower wage than something like running an excavator, right? So, that'll allow someone like a Heidelberg to reallocate labor to higher, wages may actually go up for those folks who move into different positions, whether it's overseeing the tech or overseeing different parts of the operations, moving them into higher value add jobs. Again, right, if you're dealing with a margin constrained industry, right, and you have a requirement to have a human in those trucks, then that means those are dollars that aren't being spent somewhere else. Will it all go to jobs? Will it be one for one? Who knows? I can't predict the future, but if you look at the history of any new technology, back in the 80s, automation was going to destroy auto workers, and it's certainly led to disruption, but those jobs are higher paid now. They're doing higher tech things, and so I think it'll it'll be a net positive for the industry. Maybe not every single person, and we're sensitive to that. We're not trying to put anybody out of work. And a really interesting statistic that we've heard from a couple folks that is plausible. I don't know how true it is, but the fact we've heard it from a couple independent parties, there hasn't been any job loss due to any autonomous deployment in the mining or quarrying industry. Over the last 20 years and the 1,000+ trucks that are out there, net, there has not been a net decrease in the number of humans involved in those operations.
Well, Christian, I can give you the final word. I mean, we covered a lot of ground here related to autonomy and the industry, but anything else you want to share with Pit and Quarry listeners here today about your work and the work of Pronto?
We started talking about kind of what are we doing with quarries and mines. We're working on some really interesting things that we haven't announced yet. We are working on our first deployment in the mining industry that hopefully we'll be able to talk about in the coming months. Maybe it'll be out by the time this airs. But I think it's an exciting time because autonomous haulage systems in particular are becoming accessible to the entirety of the industry. And I think it's really exciting to see how that's going to play out, how quickly, and how it's going to transform one of the most fundamental industries on the planet.
Well, it's got to be exciting for you to be on the front lines of that, and we appreciate you sharing your experience with Pronto with Pit and Quarry. So, Christian, thanks again.
Thank you. It's been great.
All right. Well, that was Christian Kurasek of Pronto. Christian, thanks again for joining us at Mine Expo, and another thank you to Bibhrajit Halder of Safe AI for doing the same. Jack, both guys had a lot of insights to offer to our audience today. It's again a category that I find tremendously interesting because it kind of represents the biggest wholesale change in terms of a quarry operation, at least in my time and probably in most of our listeners' time. When you think about taking the driver out of the truck and making ththings automated or going autonomous with equipment, there's a lot to kind of chew on there. But it seems like we're there. The last couple of years we've been talking about the opportunity and the potential there and getting into some projects. But right now it seems like we're really on the cusp of seeing real world change. These aren't just concepts anymore. We're seeing these guys, Christian and Bibhrajit talk about real world change in terms of how an aggregate operation, how a quarry can essentially function. And, that's very exciting. Bibhrajit even talking about going into 2025, putting haulers into production, with the automated systems. That's something that I wouldn't have expected for 2025, but it seems like, things are really rapidly moving along.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, we've had conversations with people over the last year. And, again, since we kind of first wrote about Luckstone and Caterpillar and their collaboration, we've, kind of talked to more and more people, more companies like Pronto, like Safe AI, Christian and Bibhrajit. And, I think kind of one of the enduring questions is, what is it that's preventing autonomy from coming to the mining or to the aggregate side, I should say. It's working well on the mining side on these super large haul trucks. What is sort of preventing it from scaling down? And I think a lot of people, kind of talk about just, obviously the size being a massive issue. You can program it for something that's going to be hauling so much. It might be kind of hard to just scale it down based on size alone. And I don't think a lot of people would have said that they thought 2025 would be the time when we'd start seeing this more and more in production. But, with Safe AI's project with CRH in Virginia and Pronto's project with Heidelberg in Texas, like you said, we're seeing those real world examples. And, we're getting a chance to, kind of see this stuff in action and give it a chance to test it out, see what's working, see what isn't. And I think you look at something Christian said in his interview where people are starting to see that it's safe, productive, effective, solves problems, saves costs, and it's kind of like we've talked about as well that he mentioned no one really necessarily wants to be that guinea pig, no one wants to necessarily be the first person, but once they kind of get a vibe, once they see what's going on, they're okay being second. They just don't want to necessarily be first. So And then, obviously, I think the last thing that stuck out from these interviews is just, where we go from here. And I think it was interesting that Bibhrajit kind of made the comment saying anything that moves can be autonomous. So, from obviously from sort of a smart aleck side, I'm like, all right, well, let's see some autonomous portable crushers. Let's see some autonomous portable screens, stuff like that. But, he obviously got into talking about how excavators may be the next thing, where similar to hauling, hauling is such a great fit for autonomy because, it's repetitive, it's sort of monotonous. You may not necessarily have the workforce or the people to sit in a haul truck all day and just do the same route back and forth. It's the same stuff all day. So it serves well towards being automated, and you can certainly say similar things for excavators. So it'll be curious to see when, sort of maybe when and if excavators start going autonomous, and 10 years from now, what else we could be talking about that's automated. And I just think it's going to be a fascinating thing to not only see where the technology goes and where the equipment goes, but also how more and more companies might be utilizing this technology to supplement workforce issues and solve other problems that present themselves.
Yeah. Dozers too, both Christian and Bibhrajit were talking about the opportunity with dozers. I think it was Bibhrajit who mentioned, they've done an autonomous dozer at this point. And I think kind of what I took away from both guys is that the costs have really come down, and they're continuing to come down to the point where not just the Vulcans, the Martins, the Heidelbergs are going to be involved in this, but like anybody. I can't remember which guy it was, but one of the two during the interviews, mentioned that they've done a project, on a small site with a single truck, and I know I asked Christian, I mean, who is this essentially applicable to? Who's this opportunity with the autonomy apply to? And he said pretty much everybody. The costs made me think, okay, at first, going back a year or two as this was starting to evolve, that, it was the big producers, those are the top 10, who can essentially invest because the cost was where it was at. But, we're seeing those price points come down like we do with any new different technology that emerges. It just takes time for it to be proven, for bugs to be worked out, I suppose, so that the technology providers can make things a little bit more cost effective, more affordable. And it seems like we're getting there. It'll probably be years, maybe decades, where we see, every site, or, it's more mainstream to see, a single site or, a smaller producer operate that way. But it certainly seems like the top 10, the big guys, this is the direction they're going. And I know Christian, toward the end of the interview, you talked about if we can make running a whole truck autonomously 50% the cost of what it is to have a manned truck driver. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, that's where the costs need to get to eventually prove the viability of the technology. And, it's certainly exciting. Like you, I'm kind of eager to see, well, what else can we do? I mean, Are we going to get, the next 50 years or half century to the point where, you're fully taking the people out of the quarry environment? I mean, that would be interesting. So, but again, really appreciated Bibhrajit and Christian getting together, and we'll keep tabs on this as it's evolving, because, they both have some case studies and projects they're working on with some high-profile name producers in our industry. So I know you and I are going to be eager to hear what's happening as we get into 2025 with projects like those and others.
Absolutely.
What else is happening in Pit and Quarry these days? Here in the fourth quarter and getting into the holidays here pretty soon. Hey, today's Election Day. Happy Election Day. If you're out there. Is there such a thing as a happy Election Day? I don't know, but we'll run with that.
Just go vote.
Yeah, just go vote. That's the Pit and Quarry stance. Just go vote.
Yeah, right.
We're here in November. Hopefully you've gotten your October edition by now. You've seen it digitally. We've got the highly coveted buyer's guide available in that. So be sure to grab your print copy or check that out online, as that's a useful resource for our readers. November should be mailing any day. If you haven't gotten yours yet, you can also check that out online here today. We've got our conveying and material handling pullout, and that full of content related to that equipment category as it relates to Pit and Quarry, and we've got some post Mine Expo show content. You heard from a couple of our guests at the show, but we've got even more from Mine Expo in the November edition of Pit and Quarry. So look for that as well. Jack, I know we meet internally here and we talk about, where are we going to be, the rest of the year. And, we just did our 2025 meeting as a staff, talking about the shows and the meetings that we want to be at. And, Pit and Quarry likes to be out and about regularly. And, I've got some travel coming up here. I know you're going to the South Carolina Aggregate Show.
Yep.
I'm doing the Missouri Limestone Producers Show here, another month or so. And I think you're going to get down to the Ohio Aggregates and Industrial Minerals Show here in not too long. So some exciting opportunities to get out and see people once again.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I have had a couple experiences at South Carolina. I know I went to Missouri a couple years ago, and like you said, that's one you're handling this year. A couple of really strong state association shows that we enjoy visiting, and this will be my first time going down to OAIMA, joined by a couple other staff members here. Excited to make that long 2-hour trek down to Columbus. I'm surprised I wasn't able to get a flight, but we'll talk about that later, I guess. But yeah, no, looking forward to it. You kind of mentioned going into the fourth quarter here. It sort of seems like the fourth quarter of a year and through the first quarter of the year is when that travel really kind of amps up. So yeah, always looking forward to getting out, seeing as many people in the industry as I can. Looking forward to going down to South Carolina, down to Columbus, and yeah, hopefully you have a good time in Missouri.
Yeah, you were at that show last year. I have not been to that one, but heard good things.
Yeah.
Heard good things from you coming out of it last year, and yeah, real eager to get to Lake of the Ozarks.
Lake of the Ozarks, yeah.
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about events, a couple of last thoughts for everybody. We've got the Pit and Corey Roundtable and Conference coming up in January. That's a 2025 event. We're going to be in the Phoenix area, so any producers out there interested in joining us, go to pitandcoreyroundtable.com. We've got information there. You can apply to attend or reach out to Jack or I directly, and we'd be happy to visit with you about what that opportunity is all about. And similarly, we've got our other Pit and Corey event coming up. That would be the Pit and Corey Hall of Fame induction ceremony. That's going to be in March at Ag 1 in St. Louis. We'll have our induction ceremony then, just like we did here in 2024 in March. It was in Nashville. So the point I wanted to share with everybody on that is if you want to nominate somebody for the Pit and Corey Hall of Fame 2025 class, the time to do so is now, as we're going to be, rounding up the final nominations and going out to our selection committee. So you can submit a nomination for the Pit and Corey Hall of Fame at pitandcoreyhalloffame.com. So we'd encourage you to nominate somebody that you feel is worthy, and pretty much everybody in aggregates, I would say, whether it's a producer, manufacturer, dealer, association representative, they're all eligible. So pitandcoreyhalloffame.com for your nominations.
I've heard from some pretty good sources that I have, in fact, already been nominated. So everyone out there, you can go ahead, hold off, give your nomination to someone else. I'm already on there, so I'll be under consideration. So just go ahead and, cast your ballot for someone also deserving, because I'll already be there. So
I think you'll be the youngest person in the Hall of Fame, Jack.
I would probably be.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to do it for episode 27, Jack. It's good to sit down with you once again, and we'll have more on equipment and technology and the state of the industry and some of our other recent interviews on future episodes of Drilling Deeper. But anything more to add?
No, just glad to have you back.
Yeah.
Good show.
I'll be here next time, hopefully. And thanks for listening, everybody.
See you.